Good evening and welcome to Critical Thoughts. I'm your host, Braxton Smith. Joining me as co-host, Jake Bird. Today is September 9th. It's the night before Hurricane Irma hits here, and I just finally had the time to get around to making another video, and Jake and I were both able to get together on this, and this is huge for us. This one's actually finally setting the record straight on the whole left versus right paradigm. So there's been like a lot of confusion so far as what exactly left wing and right wing is. This is something like I've actually been doing a lot of research. Jake's been doing a lot of research because we always attributed things. Society has always told us what left wing and right wing is, and we finally started getting around to looking into it to actually explain what is going on. And I actually have have visuals here. Jake, is there anything you want to throw in before we get started?
It's good finally being back online, and hopefully the hurricane doesn't wipe you out and we get this video done.
Yeah, I could take it or leave it, honestly. So far as the left versus right, so you're probably pretty familiar with it. I mean, for example, we were talking before we went live. We were talking about how, like, for example, even in the media, like so far as cartoons, you go and watch King of the Hill, and that's more what you would consider like right-wing kind of entertainment, whereas like you have like your Family Guy, American Dad, is more your left-wing humor. Granted, Stan, one of the characters from American Dad, you would consider as being right-wing, and then his daughter Haley you would consider being left-wing. So, we have these, like pre-constructed thoughts in our minds. It's been kind of hammered in there from the very beginning since I can remember about what left and right wing is, but we don't really know what it is specifically. There's no real words attached. It's a real loose term, and most importantly, the terminology has been flipping a lot lately. So I went out and I looked through several compasses talking about where one's political alignment is, and one of the better ones I found was actually aptly named Political Compass, and it is pretty much universally accepted, and anybody that studies politics and economics is pretty much accepted as like the gold standard for political compasses. And I actually have it printed out. Okay, got budget cuts here, so don't have this in color, and yes, I had to print it out, but I did actually kind of add in a little with ink on some of this so you can see it a little better. I decided to write in crayon with communism because, I mean, that's just how they roll. So, aptly, you got red for communism because they love to spill blood, and fascism, pretty much one and the same. We'll explain that in a minute. Black for libertarianism because black flag means no government, and, of course, capitalism, all about that gold, right? Okay, so as we see here, though, one of the better ways of describing left and right wing actually here is you have left wing, which is your communism, and your right wing, which is capitalism. That's usually the premise so far as like ideology falls upon, but unfortunately what makes things fuzzy is it's not as simple as just the x-axis. There's a y-axis as well. So you're talking about economics right here, and you're talking about political policy right here. So, somebody could lie in several different quadrants, and like I was telling Jake earlier, a lot of these go together. It's like milk and cookies. They just go together really well. Like, so, for example, fascism and communism. Usually, when a government says that we know exactly what you need to be buying, they're going to say we know exactly how you need to be living your life. And conversely, when a society stands up and says, you know what, maybe I know what's best for me as an individual, so far as I want to buy, and I want the choice, more than likely they are also going to want the choice so far as whether or not they can have sex in a manner besides missionary, for example. So, kind of been ranting. You got anything you want to throw in there, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the reason with the confusion is, back when these terms first generated during the French Revolution, the most accurate you could get, besides the right was supposed to be generally pro-monarchy and the left was generally supposed to be anti-monarchy. They wanted at least a democratic republic, if not complete democracy. The only other terms they generally had for definition was generally the right thought sometimes there were inequalities and hierarchies, and that was good. And on the left side, sometimes there are hierarchies and inequalities, and that's generally bad. It's never been real hard terms, except for like with the economic and like you mentioned, missionary. Right is generally thought to be religious, traditional, and capitalist. But as we can see, there's some religions and stuff that have had socialistic tendencies. As far as tradition goes, a lot of the left right now that consider themselves classical liberal are finding themselves in that conundrum of, for instance, free speech now being a conservative position on the right. So I think the only way we can really make any sense of it is the way you set it up with communism versus capitalism, or private property rights versus just communal property rights is another way to look at it.
Right, yeah. So, something else I wanted to point out too was, there's been this huge talk, and I guess both sides have kind of been playing hot potato, if you will, with the Nazi Party. And I actually wanted to take a moment to make the case that not the Nazis, the National Socialists, are in fact left wing. And so I actually took a little moment here, and I drew out some things on here. So, God, I just feel like we're so Gucci here with this state of the. One day I swear we're going to have this up on screen full, and we aren't going to have this analog format here. But so as you can see here, I've drawn out. You got the D and the R. That stands for Democrats and Republicans, and that's any more so far as the policies. These are the kind of policies I see them passing. They're both for the Patriot Act, which kind of puts them up towards this way. That's the other thing I want to talk about, like policies that they're passing. That decides where they end up on here. So when you pass policies like Patriot Act, you end up in this direction. When you pass policies like Affordable Health Care Act, you end up over here. Now, so both of them were for the Patriot Act, so I got them a little more up this way, right? And I could provide more examples. They're there, believe me. You do a little bit of digging, you do a little bit of thinking about it, and which one sacrifices your personal freedoms, which one sacrifices your economic freedoms. And the Democrats obviously are going to vote, and contrary to how it seems recently, because a lot of the Republicans did turn coat, and that's what I'm saying. Like, there's a lot of flip-flopping, so we're going to nip this in the bud and point out exactly where these fuckers are. Democrats, for the most part, are more likely to vote for something like Affordable Health Care Act, which puts them, this is around the grounds of socialism. Now, as you can see, there's that evil swastika. That's where the National Socialists actually are, because, yes, they did actually promote things like the Gestapo, which would go in and would just start taking trudgeons to people. As soon as you speak out against them, your First Amendment rights are gone. You can talk all you want about how the Nazis are great, but the moment you talk about, well, maybe they're a little out of control, trudgeons, and so that sends them up this way. And the thing is they did like to socialize things, for example, like healthcare, automobile industry, etc., which put them over this way. They weren't full-on communists, granted, and that's why I want to go ahead and debunk this. So people say Nazis are right-wing. The people that are telling you that are communists. More than likely, communists are either communists or they're ignorant. And so if you're a communist, then yes, you're going to be over here, and yes, the Nazis are, by that standard, right-wing. But in all reality, no, they are left-wing. So, so far as where we are anyways, well, I'm going to speak for myself here. Jake, I don't know, but that little dot I put there, that's about where I am. So, yeah, the Nazis are a little left-wing for me. So, anything you want to throw in there, Jake?
if people wanted other examples of how the both sides of the government like selling freedoms off, there's blood tests. You don't need a warrant for blood tests anymore. There's that nurse that got into trouble because he refused to give a blood test.
So he was in the right about that? So the officer was in the right on that one?
He wasn't in the right, but through Supreme Court cases and stuff, things like blood tests and breathalyzer tests are supposed to be something you could just not have a warrant for. Yeah, and both sides.
Fascism.
Both sides on left and right, the Democrats and Republicans, they've got their people that are for that, and that's how it's law now. Yeah. But I was trying to think of something else. Oh, another way you kind of know, both the Nazis and the communists had this pernicious thing where they wanted to get rid of history. For the Germans, it was make sure, the Jews and the Gypsies never existed at all in Germany at all. That was part of the whole thing to get rid of them. But for the communists in Russia, it was the kulaks, the peasant farmers that once they had...
I'm sorry, did you say kulaks?
Kulaks.
Gulags.
No, they got sent to the gulags.
Okay. So, that being said, though, a lot of what Jake's talking about, fascism, that was what I was pointing out. A lot of the terminologies they've been putting out there so far is, what is Nazis, for example, I just want to reiterate the fact that they economically speaking, they are left-wing, and they're fascist, but Antifa, they claim to be against that. That's something I wanted to debunk too. Antifa, if I had to put them anywhere, well, I already have it drawn out, and this is historically proven, is that they are actually communists. So they could be anywhere in here, but the thing is that they're out in the streets, and, free speech is free speech. Whether or not you agree with it, I shouldn't even be talking about it. I mean, it's just like, it should be common sense that freedom of speech doesn't just cover what you agree with. It also covers that which you disagree with it. And it shows a level of character when you can actually find somebody that you disagree with and you say, you know what, you're a jackass, but you shouldn't be punched in the face for being a dumbass. Not until you start punching other people in the face. But if you're on board with Antifa and you say, you know what, just because I don't like what you're saying, that's on a slippery slope. That's what the Nazis were saying about a lot of folks, and that lands you in this direction right here. So, wanted to point that out. And I wanted to point out, too, we're talking about words do matter. Something Jake's taught me about, at least made me more privy of, is the fact that, these terminologies, they keep changing. You read the book 1984 by George Orwell. He's talking about doublethink and newspeak. And it's basically where you rewire people's brains to tell them 2 + 2 = 5, and that black is white and white is black. It's meant to constantly leave people in a constant state of confusion. That's why we came up with this. Well, we didn't necessarily come up with this chart. We're presenting you rather this chart that somebody came up with that very accurately and solidly, gives you a solid ground upon which you can base political ideologies. And you run into these situations like with FDR, for example. I was talking with Jake and I was pointing out the fact about how FDR originally considered his ideas progressive. Ironically, they weren't obviously they weren't very progressive. They're very regressive, as a lot of people jokingly call progressives these days. And the term progressive got so bad that he had to remarket it. He changed the word and he snatched up a title called liberals. What we now call people today liberals, but now that's a dirty word again, and now they're being called progressives again. But Jake, for a moment, do you mind explaining to people? I think you explain it better than I do. Liberals versus conservatives.
A classical liberal is someone, it's of or pertaining to freedom. That's that's the main guiding star on how people think about things. It's what can the individual do? How do individuals relate to each other because they all have freedoms? And how do you progress from there in a civilized society where people can voluntarily get along? Conservatism is more traditionalism. It's not the cliche of just clinging on to the past, whatever the past is in its entirety, to whatever mixture composed of it. Conservatives tend to hold on to that. They tend not to want to change their ideas too much. And progressivism's the opposite. They're the ADD kid that has short-term memory problems.
Yes. Right. Yeah, and I was actually drawing out here. Speaking of ADD, I'm over here like drawing. Basically, and I got a highlighter. Basically, if I had to explain what I view liberals as being, is liberals tend to be in this box. You know, you have some that are like, people shouldn't be able to say or do this. People should have to forcefully give their wealth in this regard. And then you have conservatives, on the other hand. They're pretty bad about saying things like you shouldn't be able to drink alcohol on a Sunday. But I will say that they are, all about lowering taxes, for example, which puts them in this direction. So, I don't know. I guess that pretty much nails the whole conservative, liberal. I think that pretty much covers everything, man. You got anything else you want to throw in so far as kind of helping people understand the political spectrum? I guess like one last thing, if I could throw in, is the fact that you see the two squares that aren't hardly touched though. It's like Jake and I are over here. Ron Paul, all your a lot of the notable people in the liberty movement kind of chill over here. And then you have the establishment over here. You got Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, Jeb Bush, etc. All your establishment guys chill here, but you hardly have anybody here. You hardly have anybody here. Now, see, those are the two squares where things just don't jive. Because right here you're saying that the government's not good at deciding. Right here, you're saying the government's not good at deciding about so far as how people live their personal lives, but so far as how their money should be spent, the government excels at that. And then you have this other really weird area where people seem to think that Nazis are, which they aren't. Actually, I don't know who the hell is here, but these are the people that say that the government's really good at determining how people should live their lives, but how they spend their money is up to them. And that's just kind of conflicting. They just don't make sense. Which is why you'll always see a concentration of people that actually follow this kind of stuff. They're going to be either here or here. So, anyways, that's all I had to say anyways on that. So,
yeah, I guess for the exceptions against the rule, I guess the left libertarian example would probably be, I guess, Noam Chomsky. He's like anarcho-syndicalist somehow. Like you were saying, when it comes to people living their lives, trying to do it as freely possible is the idea, yet somehow when it comes to like property and stuff, there's going to be this communal agency or communal agencies overseeing that all the time. Kind of hurts the mind just thinking about it. But then for the upper right quadrant, that would be probably Pinochet from Chile. He's that weird dictator in South America that was like almost completely free market, but when it came to politics, he was a dictator. There was no opposing party. What he said was the law. So.
Right, and as any ANCAP watching this, they know he's he's heavily glorified in the ANCAP community for throwing communists out of a helicopter. But would you say he's so heavily against communism, so he thereby by proxy would hate Antifa? But would you say he's a Nazi?
Well, I mean, he can't be. It's just.
What's the German word for national capitalist?
You would know better than me.
The dyslexic me would say ANCAP, but maybe it's NatCap. NatCap. There it is. That's what it is.
But, I guess the final thing I want to wrap up on is, since you mentioned George Orwell, it's not even just the fact that by taking over these words and changing terminologies that it breeds confusion, but the part that really got me was in the end where Winston's sitting there in the chair being tortured, electrocuted and stuff, and he's trying to argue with this man that what he was doing was wrong, but they've already gotten rid of words like cruel, inhumane, unjust to liberty. It was just all he could say was double plus ungood. And I'm sorry, but getting electroshock therapy is a little bit beyond double plus ungood.
There's words to describe these things, yes. Yeah, so, and I guess my little last 2 cents for it is coming back to the charts. I know I feel like I'm using this as a crutch, but I want to point out that if you're anywhere in this range right here, if you're in these quadrants right here, sorry, I'm like terrible with this. Okay, so if you're anywhere in this little area right here, you're more so what one might call a collectivist. But if you're anywhere in this area here, you might be a little more for the individuals. You're an individualist, meaning that the power should lie in the individual, the smallest of all minorities. So at the end of the day, I think if you look at something like that and you hear the words that we are saying onto you, I in all honesty, I have no idea how someone could continue on and say, identify as a collectivist. At that point, and I'm going to do videos on this later on, but at this point, if you're a collectivist, you might as well, at some point, you have to accept the fact that you should be replaced by machines. If you were to say that the aspect of humanity is irrelevant, like you're a collective, part of the hive mind, you may as well be replaced by the Borg, the machines. You're snickering right now, but is that not true?
Oh, right.
Jake calls me a conspiracy
theorist. It's hard
theorist
to
all the
argue
time.
with that when you see things in the media where somehow or another people are just supposed to be square holed into a round circle of just their race or just their sex or just their gender or just whatever, and they don't recognize that individuals can be just about anything they want to be within reason. It's just, I always love how you like putting it out that way, especially with the Star Trek references.
Yeah, well, and that's another thing, and I'll dabble a little bit into it because we have the time. We got a few more minutes, a couple more minutes. I do want to point out that in all reality, we are individuals. Like, whether or not you're willing to accept it, the fact of the matter is we are individuals. We have our preferences. That being said, there's different cultures. We have our 50 states in the U.S., and that's why, with the recent push for California to secede, I'm all for that, actually. What I would prefer is that the rights go back to the individual states and take it away from the federal government, because at the end of the day, I mean, there are like 1,000 different possibilities. Okay, I could probably do the math, and it's probably a little less than 1,000, but it's pretty damn close to it. All these different possibilities. You at the very least have a chance of being placed into 4 different quadrants. Why are we forcing ourselves under one cookie-cutter federalist policy? I think that's what's driving everybody crazy right now, is the fact that we're trying to subject each other to, either this or this. It's just these two paradigms, like these two quadrants we're trying to subject each other to, and it's just like, every state's different. There's different cultures. Quit trying to put everybody under the same damn cookie cutter policies. Leave the power to the states. So, anyways, with that being said, you got any last? I'm wrapping it up for real this time. So.
Well, to hammer that point and everything, yes, we're not denying the fact that there are certain like core principles that no one can get away from having to observe. For instance, killing people indiscriminately is a bad thing, but most of those types of things that you would enforce almost universally are that way because everybody already recognizes it that way. And the important thing with giving it back to the states and ultimately the individuals within them is so that they can talk using their free speech, have honest, open discussions and arguments to actually figure out how they want to live their lives. And if they start coming up with arguments that just one side can't defeat, okay, maybe that's the way it needs to be. But until that's the case, you don't just get to go, well, I'm the one with the shiny badge, so follow what I say, or you get the bloody end of my
you get the
blood.
clamps. Yes, absolutely. All right, so excellent point. And to wrap it all up, I want to put it out there. It's still indefinite at this point, but we do have a couple events coming up. Jake and I will be having a debate on genetically modified organisms versus organic diets. And we'll be clearing up that debate title a little better later down the road. But we're going to have a 15-20 minute discussion about that. This is something we constantly clash about, and we definitely plan on throwing down on that. Should be really good debate. I'm really looking forward to that. And going to be doing a couple fundraisers for a friend of mine. He's running for city council in San Diego right now in California. So I'm going to try and raise some funds for him, get some pretty good videos out discussing very controversial ideas. I really was glad to have this video with you, Jake, because this is something I can't believe. And the whole reason I put out this video and wanted to do this video with you is because I haven't seen anybody else do it. Like Tom Woods, Glenn Beck, none of them are touching on it, and here we are today. Hopefully it helps somebody out there. So that being said, thank you again for tapping into Critical Thoughts, breaking through the white noise to bring you the media that matters.